Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Simply Felicity. I'm excited. My guest is just situating his camera and everything, so as soon as he gets set, I will bring him on. Very excited that he chose to come on today to be able to tell his story. It's a very unique story. It's a story that's kind of being featured more and more by different people. So I'm going to, I believe he's ready now. Um, Well, even if he's not, it's okay. He's kind of fun as he's like getting it together. But I'm going to bring on William West. Hello.
My audio, when you speak, the audio is skittering, and it says that it'll correct itself, but
Oh, okay. It seems
so I
correct.
can I
My
can I
audio.
can't really hear you. It's like
Hmm. Wonder what
let
that
me try to
is.
log in. Let me try to log in from another browser. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Sorry for the tech difficulties, everyone.
All
All right,
right.
give
We'll
me
see you in a
10
minute.
seconds.
Very good. Okay, so you guys got to see William West. If you are having trouble hearing me, would anyone mind writing that in the comments for me? That would be really helpful just to make sure. But everything seems to be set up like it was last night, so I think it should be okay. Well, as we are waiting for William to come on, I just wanted to, I was just kind of thinking Saturday is my birthday. So it's my birthday week, and I love celebrating all month when I can. Um, and just been thinking about some of the really life-changing events that have happened for me this year. I worked with a new life coach who has just been tremendous. Hoping that I'll be able to get Joaquin Flores on again soon to the shows. He just has so much to share and so much to give. And it's really transformed my spiritual journey, just taking it to the next level. He's been very good about instilling confidence as well in my life. Like, I guess for me, just sometimes perceiving that I'm different than people around me, which, everybody's different, right? But sometimes I would let that make me feel like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Everybody seems to feel so differently. But he's really kind of given me the confidence to feel like very strong in my uniqueness. So, anyway, that's been one thing. A second thing that's been life changing for me has been working with a group, and they actually have a show called We Talk, and it's called Prayer Talk, and you can find them at theprayertalk.com or .org. Anyway, I've been meeting with this group of mostly Africans and some African Americans or just other Americans. It has been absolutely tremendous and life changing for me. Um, and the best way I can describe it is I feel like whenever you, like when people go to therapy, it's very healing because they look into their past. And so maybe I'll talk more about that another time, but we've actually got William West that has rejoined us. And I'm going to mention the third thing that has been very life changing for me this year. And we've got you back. All right. Yay. Thank you. So wait a minute. I just want to make sure I can hear you.
Can you? I can hear
Oh,
you just
okay.
perfect.
Okay. Great. Okay. I
Great.
couldn't hear anything at first. You were like so quiet over there.
Well,
Um,
I'm sorry I missed the intro, but go on and we'll pick up
yeah,
where.
no. So I was sharing with everyone. So my birthday is Saturday. And yay. So I was just sharing three really life changing things for me this year. And the third one is joining this commission to create a council for White House Council for Boys and Men. And I've just met the most tremendous people in this group, and I've been able to bring a couple of them on the show, some referrals from them, as I've been highlighting issues related to men and boys. I definitely, being the host of Black Conservative Female, I have thought about the impact of the whole toxic masculinity conversation. It's an entire spectrum um, of ways of marginalizing men and boys. I didn't really know that people were working on these issues, and so I've been really excited to be a part of this. this commission, and just to shed light on those issues. So anyway, guys, welcome with me, William West. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I feel the same way. So that's how we met. I assume that's why you're giving that background. We met at this sort of men's rights coalition, the White House Council for Boys and Men. And I was introduced to that organization through one of my mentors, Stanley Green, who is he's a well-known male survivor of domestic violence. He was one of the first people to ever go on national TV as a male survivor. Back in the 90s, and like Oprah and that type of thing. So really like breaking through the barrier of awareness that these issues that are always framed as like exclusively women's issues absolutely happen to men and boys, and there's unique dynamics that impact men and boys.
Well, certainly part of the uniqueness is not really feeling the freedom to talk about it. Like, and is there some type of fear of, what will be the impact on your being looked on as a man, right? I mean, anyone in these situations is concerned about being believed straight off the bat. You worry if anyone's going to believe you, but then I think for you guys, you have to worry about what if they do believe you as well. And then what are they going to say about you if they actually believe that it's true? So give us some of your background. I mean, there were a couple of things I had heard. Had you said that you've survived sex trafficking? Is that your background, or being a sex worker or something? No.
Right. That's my background, and that's a good distinction to make. So I've experienced domestic violence in a same-sex relationship more than once. So, I mean, that's not alien to me, but my background, the work that I do is I work with people that are involved in the sex trade, and that's mostly consensual adult sex workers, but there is some crossover with trafficking, of course. And so in my experience as someone who's worked in the sex industry,
I've seen. Talking about pornography, I am so sorry. Like, I am a little foreign to the space. So is that pornography?
Let's lay it on the table, girl. Yeah, no. So personally, I've not worked in pornography. I've worked in full service sex work. So like escorting, prostitution is the legal term. You know what I mean? And I'm happy to talk about that with you because I like you, I trust you, but also I've like come out as someone who's formerly done sex work, that's a really big liability for a lot of people, which is why activism or advocacy around those issues is difficult because it's criminalized and very stigmatized. So people just, they might leave it and then like they don't ever want to think about it again, and they don't really want to like revisit that to try to make the industry safer or to give people like better alternatives to that lifestyle. So I'm out. So I'm happy to disclose that. And the people that I've worked with in like nonprofits and service organizations are, like I said, they're, people that are involved in pornography, so legal forms of sex work, as well as criminalized forms of sex work, like prostitution. And that can mean like high class escorting where the money is really good and you can fund your college education hypothetically. But what it also can include is what we might call survival sex work, which is just like street-based prostitution. It's obviously something done out of no other options, or it's fueled by addiction or mental health issues or some other intersecting thing. So it really runs the gamut. There is a crossover with trafficking is what I'm trying to say. I have worked with people that are at risk of exploitation or have been exploited in the past. I've experienced different types of exploitation in the sex industry, but not necessarily like legal definition trafficking. That's an important distinction.
No, I really appreciate you laying that out for me. Interestingly, West, I actually, part of my sort of testimony is that when I realized that I was like at kind of a really low point in my life, I was on a date with this guy. I was working with at the Arena Stage Theater right after college on an internship. and I didn't quite know what was going to be next for me, right? I mean, I went to Princeton. Everything was like looking amazing. I got this great internship, but like I didn't know what was next, and I couldn't quite put together something equally as impressive as what I'd been doing or whatever. Anyway, this guy, we were like reviewing my skills and talking about my different options and stuff, and he's like, you know, you're a really great date. I'm like, yeah, thanks. You know, he's like, no, I mean really good, like professionally good. Like professionally good. What are you talking about, you know?
Professional
And
dater, what's that?
yeah, so anyway, he's like, listen, you could, and he really wanted me to move to DC anyway. And he's like, listen, the escort business in DC is high, you know, politicians, some of them have these like really frumpy wives. You don't really want to take them anywhere. Like, I mean, you could make amazing money. And I'm like, yeah, that is really far from what I went to Princeton for. Like, and I was like, it really messed with my mind that as we sat there and assessed my skill set, that was like the best we could come up with. And I really didn't have a personal rebuttal anyway. It's just kind of.
I feel you. It's sort of a sad state of affairs where, you know, for a lot of college educated people, if, you know, the degree, it doesn't really translate into the job market, especially if they're like women.
Yeah.
So it is a women's issue. It affects women a lot, you know, but men too. But yeah, it's sort of, isn't that a reflection of the state of our economy, the health of our society? That's really like the best way to keep a roof over your head, even with like marketable skills and high education. So, you know, that's sort of like that's a good intro into sort of the pros and cons of sex work. And I use the term sex work, even though it's a political term to describe prostitution. The legal term is just prostitution, but I use sex work personally. But yeah, you know, there's pluses and cons to it in terms of social and economic mobility, which is why we find so many people in it, because it's one of the few jobs with a low entry level. You know, you don't need to have any like special education or anything, and you can make a good amount of money potentially, depending on, you know, the type of work you're doing. It's a very broad range, so I'm speaking in very big generalities here, but that's, you know, the potential is there to make a lot of money, and to, if you're smart, you can use that money to do lots of things. But at the same time, it's a discouraging path if that's not what you want to do. And I feel like most people don't want to be in the sex industry if they had like real alternatives. So I'm also a person of faith, and I'm really happy to be here, Felicity, because in the sort of community that I work with, like the sex worker rights community, we'll call it, it's very liberal, progressive, you know, and I'm cool with that. I have my own politics, but as a person of faith, I encountered a lot of faith-based organizations that were doing really meaningful outreach to people involved in prostitution and sex work. Even though I don't necessarily agree with the policy prescriptions of a group like the Salvation Army, you know, I have my own views on what's the best way to like make it less dangerous than the Salvation Army. But nonetheless, those faith-based groups are really doing the on-the-ground work, and they have been for a long time. So they have a really strong rapport within the community.
Was that your entry into a life of faith, or did you have that even through your sex working journey? I mean, that would be hard to imagine, but I guess you could.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a part of kind of my faith. My testimony building was seeing, you know, seeing people like walk in that Christ-like path, and withholding judgment, and first trying to just reach out to people where they're at and help them with what they need, and to just recognize them as human beings. And I know that goes a long way with people, whether they want to get out of the industry or not. Just to be seen as a human being is a big deal for someone that's sort of involved in the sex industry. It can make you feel very dehumanized, right?
Yeah, it certainly made me feel that way, even being, you know, presented, and I mean, it just really kind of put a mirror up to my face to think, like, of course I wanted to make money, but it was kind of like, how bad do I want to make money? And it's kind of like, how much is your soul worth almost, you know what I mean? I was just looking at that the other day, that what good is it to gain the whole world and lose your soul? And I just, when people talk about ways to make the industry safer and whatever, but I'm like, is there any way to do that kind of work and not lose your soul? I mean, I don't know that I can imagine that there is. I think that especially if you believe in a creator, we can look and see that everything's been created, and that sex in particular has been created as something good, but has been given some constraints to keep it good for you, right? So that it can be good. And it's just like a gun or Facebook or water. All of those things really could kind of kill you, or they could be amazing, right?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying with that. It's, so it's a challenge that I've gone through a personal, like a political journey in terms of my approach to the work of trying to make sex workers safer. Not necessarily the industry, but sex workers themselves, to give them the tools to operate more safely and efficiently.
Now that makes sense to me, because if you're going to do it right, but
focus on the person.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not trying to make pornographers a higher profit margin. I don't care about that. I'm just trying to make people in the industry have autonomy and safety as much as possible. But yeah, so my story is interesting because I was doing prostitution for over 10 years, and I was also doing activism at that time in the anti-trafficking space. So I worked with my first job with an anti-trafficking organization.
I'm sorry, let me stop you real quick. Is that particularly long? That seems really long. Is that average? How long do people stay in?
I don't know. I'm 35, so I got into the game, we'll call it that, at like 25, which is actually younger than a lot of people get involved. Most people, I guess the statistics are the average age of entry is lower, but I started at 25. But at that time, I was also working with a coalition to abolish slavery and trafficking, CAST LA, which is the biggest anti-trafficking organization in the country.
Wow.
And they work with both labor and sex trafficking survivors, which labor trafficking is a really big part of the trafficking problem. It's, we hear about sex trafficking a lot, but labor trafficking probably has like equally high numbers in terms of people impacted, and it's overwhelmingly men that are impacted because of like agricultural labor and that type of thing.
Can you define that for me too? I'm like a student today. So labor trafficking is just like almost like slave work, like barely getting paid for what you do.
Barely getting paid, or there's like some element of the federal definition of labor or sex trafficking is if there's force, fraud, or coercion involved. So a labor trafficking situation might be, sure, you're a foreign immigrant worker, you signed a contract with some company to work seasonally, like on a farm or something. You go there, you arrive, and then they take your passport, or the living accommodations aren't up to par, or the arrangement isn't what they told you it was. And then once you start working there, there's like threats that they're going to get you deported if you don't do the work that they tell you, or they withhold some of your wages, or in the worst cases, they'll threaten your family back home if you try to leave the situation. So that's what makes it trafficking, or modern day slavery, as people might call it.
Got it.
And so it's similar dynamics with sex trafficking, except it's a little more, inflammatory and like enraging when we hear about sex trafficking. But labor trafficking is just as horrible and can have just as negative an impact on someone's life, and like, it kills people, So I started in this anti-trafficking world at this organization, CAST LA, while I was doing prostitution. And so I would be doing outreach constantly, a couple times a week, doing outreach at like youth groups and at, things like farmers markets and community fairs and things like that, just to raise awareness about trafficking happening. And I would share some of my experience when I was doing outreach that I was, doing sex work. I didn't really hide it. But it was kind of, people would be like, wow, so you're here. I remember I'd go to like youth, like LGBT youth fairs or something and be doing this outreach for anti-trafficking work. And these kids would be like, cool, this is really good information. So you do sex work and you're opposed to anti-trafficking. I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense. And I'd be like, well, let's back up, like sex work and trafficking exist on a continuum. Not everyone that does sex work is trafficked, etc. I'm an example of that. And so I had to kind of explain that to people. But in the course of doing this for so many years, I started to realize that like my own experience wasn't reflected in the type of advocacy I was doing. I was like advocating for like somebody else out there, but not including my own experience into that. So over the years, I kind of shifted my focus a little bit to get more involved in like peer-led sex worker groups where, it's other people that have similar experiences that are connecting with each other to kind of share information and to like uplift each other, rather than like an outside organization that like probably doesn't have people that know what you're going through, even though they mean well. That just doesn't really resonate with people, and it didn't resonate with me. And so I'm really happy that I got involved in organizations like Sex Workers Outreach Project, which is the largest national sex worker advocacy organization. And I kind of, getting involved in the sex worker rights movement, I sort of brought my history of the anti-trafficking work with me. And that's not just me. A lot of people in the sex worker rights movement, they really care about ending human trafficking because sex workers are the ones that are most at risk of being exploited,
right,
by those networks. So there is like a mutual interest there. But unfortunately, within the policy realm and the advocacy realm, there is a disconnect between like the organizations that do anti-trafficking work and the organizations that try to work with sex workers, like harm reduction groups type of thing. That's kind of what I would define a group like SWAP as, or like a harm reduction group. They're not trying to get people into the industry or get them out of the industry necessarily. They're just trying to help them be safer while they're doing it.
They say, got it. So I was also, the first thing that intrigued me about you is that, and you are real open, because I think you said it like within the group that you used to be transgender, or were you about to transition or something? Did you say that?
Yeah, I love that you remembered that. That was like an off comment that you remember. Good for you.
Dude, my ears perked up so bad. I almost like messaged you in the Zoom chat. I was like, what the hell? Are you serious? And that, you're really an open person. And that's why you would say it.
You are too, Felicity.
Well, thank you. I mean, I guess, like attracts like, right? I was like, whoa, is there another unicorn here? But unicorn spotted. But the fact that you would even say it offhandedly like that, like most people, like there would have to be some kind of lead up or something like that for them to even bring it. And I'm like that as well. So, like it just seems like there's a connection there in between you deciding that you wanted to sort of do the more peer-to-peer thing. There's some type of looking within, like, okay, let me examine. Am I trying to make everything real external? Like, I'm going to help you people. I don't need any help. I'm totally fine. So that journey within, I mean, how did that resonate with your decision?
Regarding like the transgender thing? Yeah, definitely. Well, it's like I said, it's been a journey. But I don't think that part of my life where I consider myself like someone who's detransitioned. So I used to take female hormones, estrogen, and for a couple years, like 4 years or so, I was sort of presenting in a different way. Like I dressed very feminine. I kind of was trying to confuse people a little, you know what I mean? So I was kind of like playing the role as like a trans femme person, we'll call it, in society. But I didn't really know like how I felt inside. In all honesty, it was somewhat of a political statement, a philosophical position that I had. And it was also kind of a cultural thing because, I came up in the LGBT community. I've been like a gay rights activist for many years. And so that was always part of like the milieu that I was around. and I had many friends that transitioned. So it wasn't like this alien thing to me. It was something I felt safe, like dipping my toe in. But what I'll say about that is hormones are like the most powerful drugs in the universe.
Wow.
They can totally change your perception of the world, your thinking process, your emotional kind of how you go about in the world, your self-perception. So they're very powerful drugs. And I kind of minimized, when I was taking estrogen, I minimized the impact it would have on me. I kind of just thought it would be, I don't know what I thought. I think I wasn't really thinking about it too much. I don't regret that time in my life because it was a good learning experience. And like I said, I have many friends in that community and I respect their experience. And, you know, I just try to be a good friend and like love them for who they are. But for myself personally, that wasn't the path that I ultimately wanted to go on. I'm very comfortable in my skin now as a man. I'm more comfortable in my skin now than I've ever been, but
that's wonderful.
That just wasn't my experience, and it's something that I don't really even tell my friends that are, you know, that are very pro-trans, LGBT rights and all that. I kind of like don't tell them that part of my history unless I like know them, because I don't know how they're going to react. Are they going to think that I'm like an enemy of the community, or that I hate trans people, or that I'm fundamentally opposed to transgenderism? I mean, that's another conversation to be had, but
right.
I don't want anyone to think that I'm like a hateful person just because my own lived experience doesn't really go along with the narrative that in the current year, you know, we hear this narrative that like, if you just transition, everything will get better. All your problems will go away. That's the root cause of like whatever you're feeling, depression, anxiety, XYZ. You just got to transition. And you know what? That might be true for a lot of people. I've seen that be true for a lot of people, that it like helps them in one way or the other. But for me, it was not the case. And I don't really know where I can share that. Can't really share that within the LGBT community without getting a little backlash. And certainly in like the straight world,
well, you know, yeah, no, and I mean, definitely, like, you know, within your faith, like we would want to like hold you up as like the reason that you don't, you know, I gotta say, like scientifically and statistically, there are some real like challenges, you know. There were statistics even 3 years back that 70% of people that transitioned regretted it, even like a month after. And wow. So, you know, those types of things, I mean, they're cautionary tales that those numbers don't really get out. And even as you were talking about, now I've never heard anybody talk about the hormonal thing, but what I did learn recently, because we did kind of a month of men on Black conservative female. And so we talked to Warren from our group, and we talked to Vermel Green and just some other people. Anyway, what I learned was that it was Vermel Green that told us that people that biologists, if they're going to study gender or something, they either pick the male brain or the female brain because they're so different. Like you literally can't learn both. You will not be an expert if you try to learn both. And so it just makes sense to me like that the hormones would go to match, you know, kind of how differently that we're designed. Now we're all quite different from each other as well. I mean, so I get that, but it's just some things that you're saying resonate with some scientific things that I've learned. And I do think that those things need to at least be considered, because, you know, if people go through all of this work and transitioning and things like that without really getting presented a full picture of what the consequences could be, and especially now, you know, I will say this though, in life, when you think anything's going to be a panacea, that's going to be a problem. Right. Like marriage, or, you know what I mean? Like when I just get married, when I just have these kids, when I just get these damn kids out of the house, like, no,
dude. Money or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you just ain't going to be happy. Like,
it's so true. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. You know, like whatever anyone's ideological or political position on like the transgender question is, I think we should all be able to agree that transparency and real data that's not fueled by an agenda is in the best service of the people that we're talking about, like people that identify as transgender. They deserve all of the real data. And so it's a little, I learned quickly not to tell everybody so fast about my experience being a detransitioned person, because of like, I don't know how I'm going to be received. And that's not in service to the trans community. They really do deserve all the information. And also there are lots of people like me that have similar experiences where, they've gone through a journey, or they've gone back and forth or whatever. And like, we are not necessarily a cautionary tale for all trans people. We're just sharing our own experience, and other trans people can probably relate to that. So we don't need to hide in the shadows, and my existence doesn't negate the existence of somebody else. Like there's room for all of us in this earth.
Yeah, like for the most part, I don't really like the this matters and that matters thing. But if I would hang my hat on something, I would say that stories matter, because the more we're able to speak and express these stories, you can really begin to put these things together, at least for yourself, and how to make the best decisions. But suppressing voices, that is not, you know what I mean? That doesn't help anybody. In fact, I've got several people watching right now saying how eye-opening this is and how appreciative they are for your openness and being willing to share this, because it's just, these are the conversations that we're not really having.
Yeah, totally. I think that's why you and me connect, Felicity, is we both find ourselves in this space, especially like in the White House Council for Boys and Men is a good example of this. It's filling a vacuum in the cultural dialogue, and with really important things that need to be discussed, but for whatever reason, they're politically inconvenient at the moment to discuss, or they're like untouchable topics. Nothing is an untouchable topic.
No.
When we're talking about human lives and experiences, we really need to have transparency and honesty, and just, I assume good faith with people, and I hope people assume good faith with me. I'm not coming into any space to like disrupt it or like control the narrative, or make it about my own experience. I'm here to meet people where they're at, accept and acknowledge their life experiences. And I also want to be accepted and acknowledged for my life experiences. So it's all good in the hood. It's all peace and love, but people have different experiences.
Yeah. So share with me kind of final thoughts, like what, as you've been in the faith community for a little while now, or in the spiritual space, like what have been your takeaways, and what do you appreciate about your spiritual journey?
Well, something I can say is in dealing with people that are in like, bad or dangerous or self-destructive patterns, like with drug addiction, or, sex work can definitely feed into that. I don't like to say that all sex work is inherently this or that, is inherently good or inherently harmful. There's arguments to be made about the nature of sex work and the impacts it has just objectively on like mental health and your self-esteem and all of that. Those are conversations worth having, but I don't like to speak in absolutes. But certainly what I've learned is just, okay, let me back up and get personal for a second. So I had a boyfriend a few years ago who was like a hardcore meth addict, and I've had lots of friends that have struggled with meth and hard drugs like that, so I have empathy for those people. But that was the first time that I had ever like been really deeply, intimately involved, like enmeshed with someone that was in like hardcore active addiction. And after that relationship ended, like very messy, as you might expect or anticipate. For a while, I had this like sort of like guttural disdain for addicts. Because of what I had been like basically harmed by one. And at the time I was working at the LGBT center on a research study, doing interviews with like homeless people about drug use, that required that I was really empathetic. and that I was really non-judgmental, you know,
Mm.
and that I was meeting them where they were at. So it was important for me to have like a healthy level of, disconnect or boundaries. But at that point, because of that, the experience I just recently had, I like couldn't empathize. I couldn't get past my own judgment to like love them and just like meet them where they were
Mm.
at. And I couldn't do my work. And so I had to take like a year or two to sort of get away from that job. And as I kind of healed personally, I was able to rediscover that kind of like Christ-like consciousness of just like loving people where they're at, and
Yes.
recognizing I'm a sinner too, and that life is a struggle and we're all trying our best. So I'm
Yes.
happy to say I finally got back to that place where I can have empathy for people and for myself. But I feel like that's a spiritual truth that I learned through my work, is that
Wow.
that has to be your first thing. You have to come in pure of heart and intention, and leave your biases sort of behind,
Yes.
if you really want to do like healing, like righteous work.
Wow. That is just so powerfully said. And it reminds me of in the Beatitudes, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And, here's the thing that has even upped my compassion level, is to not just understand it cognitively, but to have lived through the fact that the less judgmental I became about others, I also became easier for me to live with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've really understood is that judgmental people really have a hard time with themselves as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that has really upped my compassion as well. So I just want to share that with you guys, because it's a real gift to be able to recognize that the hardest people, they're like controlling and all this, and you really, they really turn you off and whatever. Just remember like how hard of a time they have with themselves. Like, you may never really have to be alone with that person, but they never get away.
Right.
It's really rough. Like, and I think it's out of that heart, not as an attempt to show us how mean we are or something, but it's out of that heart that Jesus told us to pray for our enemies, because of how hard of a time they're having, right? Hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
And we rarely get to the beginning of that, to really empathize with the hurt people. And that's something as well that I'm getting on this commission for men and boys, right? Like, we're thinking about what, like, who are the most of the people in jail, all of our mass murderers, all these things are men, right? And so we rarely really empathize. All we really do is like try not to feel so bad about our own pain or hurt or whatever, enough to just free ourselves in the arena of forgiveness. But there is a space to really empathize and to really understand how hurt they are. And especially if you don't have to live that way anymore, if you have gotten free of that judgment, like, shoot, I mean, they are just a reminder of how blessed you are all the time. So it's like it can really change our dynamics of how we treat people, because some people are like pretty cool until they run across a judgmental person, and then they really become what they hate. And that happened to me. Like, God showed me that I was doing that. So anyway,
Well,
I love how you go ahead.
I'm really glad you shared that.
Thank you. Well, you pull things out of me for sure. I'm just so glad that you came on the show. It's just been a joy to know you. And, I went on your YouTube channel hoping to see more, because you really do some great editing. And but I don't know how old that one video it was of you singing, but I was like, oh, wow, he can sing. But I saw what you're talking about with the long hair.
I had the long hair, yeah. I had the good highlights that cost a lot of money. But, yeah, I made that little goofy video. I made this little agitprop video. It wasn't for the White House Council for Boys and Men. It was just like a piece of art that I made, but it was about male survival. It was a little 1.5-minute music video, but for your viewers, it was sort of lampooning this idea that women cannot be abusers, or
oh yeah,
was lampooning this minimization that we see in the media constantly, that men and underage boys specifically are like kind of excluded from the conversation nationally about sex trafficking. It was making fun of Ghislaine Maxwell and just how she kind of used these like feminist platitudes to try to get her jury reselected, you know, just like this totally shameless exploitation of social justice mores or whatever to try to like weasel her way out of the legal system. But yeah, so that just really doesn't sit well with me, because, you know, I work with the survivors of exploitation, sometimes trafficking, like in the case of Ed Buck, who was a really prominent Democratic mega donor, even though his status as a mega donor was uniformly downplayed by the mainstream media, including the New York Times. And I worked with that reporter in the most recent New York Times article about Ed Buck, like 6 months ago that came out or whatever. And even he he stayed on that story for a year before he published that. And he even minimized, and I talked with him for hours, and he still minimized, you know, the larger network that Ed Buck was connected to. He tried to make out Ed Buck to this lone, like, you know, malicious figure, which is just not the case. He was enabled by a system that if you provide enough power or influence or prestige to the system, to the establishment, you can pretty much get away with anything. And Ed Buck is this like horrifying example of just how enabling the system will be for like monstrous people, especially when the victims are boys or men.
Wow. Well, I wonder how this system is coming down with the recent admission of the guards that they did falsify records on Epstein's death. So, you know,
right.
prayers are being heard, and obviously they cut a pretty good deal to give up that information. God, I hope they have some amazing protection on their lives. Like everyone is worried about them.
Me too. I hope Ghislaine Maxwell is alive and well to see her trial. I feel the same way about Ed Buck. Everyone was so happy when Ed Buck got arrested, because as kind of a community coalition, we all put a lot of pressure on everyone we could for over a year to get him arrested, because he was still soliciting like basically homeless guys or guys that were addicted to drugs. And I don't know if you know the story very well, but he basically got off on like dosing them with like a bad batch of drugs and watching them teeter on the edge of life. That was kind of his thing. And then he had this whole like race play thing that fed into it that was just really disgusting. And like, yeah, his story is just like really awful. But when he got arrested, we were so happy, and because he was off the streets, he couldn't be doing that to people anymore. And so people are like, yeah, he can die in jail, who cares? But I'm like, no, dude, like make sure he's like alive, because, you know, we got him off the streets, but it's not justice unless he's held accountable for his crimes for everyone to see, because that sends a message that that type of thing is not okay. And there are certainly many more people that are operating like Ed Buck under some kind of protection because of whatever money or status they have or connections they have. They're operating under protection. That's why they feel they can get away with this stuff. You know, being a high-class hooker in Hollywood for many years, I've seen a lot of really careless rich people where I've gone to like clients' house, we call them. You know, I've gone to clients' houses before, and I'm just looking around and I'm like, wow, you're really loaded and you're friends with famous people. And I just get the sense like you could do anything to me and get away with it somehow. And that power dynamic is very visceral when you're like on the receiving end of it. And that's really where a lot of the danger in sex work comes from, is this power differential between the buyer and the seller.
Makes sense.
And that the sex seller, the sex worker, prostitute, is essentially like disposable in the eyes of the criminal justice system, as well as in the eyes of some of the Johns, you know, humans. So that's really, that's kind of the wedge that I try to disrupt that power differential. And like I said, just, you know, if sex, like in California, I'm really happy that I was involved in this law that passed in California 2 years ago, SB 233. And it basically allowed people that were involved in prostitution or sex work or minor drug offenses, they could report being a victim of a violent crime or being a witness to a violent crime without without fear of getting arrested for.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, so it didn't decriminalize drug use or sex work. It just made it so that people that were victims or witnesses of violence wouldn't be afraid to report it. So that disrupts that power.
Yes.
Differential,
I love
and that's the ripple effect that makes everyone safer. So that's the kind of like approach that I have with like policy stuff with sex worker issues.
Got it. That's fantastic. And I really want to I want to show that video. Actually want to end with it. I was wondering, I'm always having to ask you, but would you mind putting in the private chat, putting the link, or actually you could put it in the however you want to send it to me, but I saw you knew how to use that. So then I will be able to share it. But I think it is very powerful. I'm wanting all of you watching, make sure you share this broadcast because we're having a unique conversation that needs to be had and a lot more people need to see it. So,
yeah, I've got the link coming up. Just give me like 20 seconds.
Yeah, no problem. Because I want to say something. I want to say, I think, you're helping really on both ends by disrupting the power dynamic and making sure you're going after those things on the end of those that can hurt those without that personal power. But also, Wes, I gotta say, like, in your personal journey and taking your power back, becoming comfortable in your skin and recognizing the power and the giftings that God has given you, you're able to disrupt it on the other end too, because you have a powerful personal story to share. And I'm so thankful that you would come on and do that with me.
Oh, thank you, honey. Yeah, I'm I'm not gonna lie. I grew up in a Mormon household. So I have I grew up in a faith community. My parents were active, and I didn't really, as a kid, I didn't really vibe with. I don't know. It didn't resonate with me. I don't know. I kind of I found my faith later in life. It kind of came full circle. So I'm non-denominational at this point, but I'm still kind of new on my journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really appreciate being here. Just it's just nice to be with you and everything you're doing.
I totally agree. It's really that pure in heart thing. And there's no age to being pure in heart. The difficulty actually is keeping your purity and not, you know what I mean? It's often those that quote know the least that can really kind of know the most. It's just, that's what the journey is really about.
Right.
Kind of little contrary to how people act sometimes in, say, churches or where they're teaching you about faith. They kind of have you thinking that maybe, once you learn more, maybe you'll be better. But it's really a practice of humility. And that's really got to be forefront to understand the heart of the journey.
I'm still looking to find fellowship. I appreciate that. I've kind of found fellowship in the advocacy space over the years. That's kind of filled that void. But fellowship is important. So I'm still looking for it. I still would like to find a parish or a church that with like-minded people. But in the meantime, I'm meeting people like you. My mentor is a person of faith, and he's really helped me on his journey just by example. He never proselytized to me or anything. He just led by example, and I paid attention. But I shared the video in the chat, by the way.
I see it. I am queuing it up for everyone now.
There's a swear word in this video, though, so we should warn you, audience.
Yes. So it is of a sensitive nature, you could say, but it's really only the one word at the beginning kind of catches your attention, and then you're off into the messaging. So I feel comfortable sharing it. Anyway, the people that follow me on Facebook kind of know I can jump off there. But my whole thing is I just don't like it when there's no purpose, where people are just blah, blah, blah. But there are things that it's the best way to express it. Oh, hold on. I thought I pressed pause. So anyway, give me one moment, guys, and then we will see this awesome work by William West. How do you even say your last name?
Siegmiller. But yeah, there's purpose to this video. The purpose is to make fun of Ghislaine Maxwell and all of her BS, and for exploiting like social justice terms and the zeitgeist for her own selfish, like evading responsibility. So no, like, you know, if you really care about social justice and women's equality, we cannot let monsters like Ghislaine Maxwell like use that to fucking weasel out of, to weasel out of responsibilities. That's why I made this video, just fueled by my righteous.
Tell us how you really feel, baby. I love it. I love it. Here we go. So closing us out, believe all women. Makes me think of ramen. Okay, here.
In a cult in a relationship. You can be in a cult in a family, and then there's the elite cult, and that's what they're protecting all.
Believe all women crying out at once, but how could we forgotten all the rotten lying cuts? Beware reptiles amidst the dust, the iron fist in velvet gloves. Demonstrate your loyal like a royal little dunce.
She's worse than Epstein. She is a monster. She was vicious. She was evil, and she's a woman.
The nocturnal length, you on the bad list, while media conglomerates glorify the interest. Go on and on, the vaccine past is total war between the sexes. The CIA knows better, that's the color twist. Rich might tell us things aren't always what they seem. FBI extortion didn't Martin Luther King, who benefits from social disorder, venomous to our sons and daughters. When the real survivors speak, why aren't they listening?
I love it. That is our call to action, is to listen. Thank you so much, William West. Fantastic. And I really appreciate you.
This was really fun. Thanks for the time. My dogs are barking, so I guess we got to go.
I guess so. Until next time. Bless you.
All right. God bless. Ciao.